Anh là người không thích học mấy lợi sau này.
Vậy mà anh sẽ là anh sẽ con chào.
Một cơm em. To the giver, to the giver, to the giver. Ôi nói thế nhưng mình vẫn phải uống cho da nó đẹp. Làm gì có sự đẹp đẽ nào mà không phải hy sinh và mất mát. Có những con người lười gào thét mãi không chịu tập thể dục, tối nay tập gấp đôi này, đặt điên đấy.
Thôi em giảm cân rồi mà em có thể nó giảm cân đó.
Nhìn cái bụng này giảm nhiều quá cơ, không khác gì trước cái cũ, không khác gì nhau.
Khác mà có xì ra hết rồi mà. Đúng rồi.
nay ăn gì? Ăn cơm cá kho với lại nấu canh hôm mai sẽ ăn xương. Đi tập thể dục đi, lấy cái thảm ở đây. Anh lên. Nghỉ cái gì sao lại bắt đầu đi vào nó không? Tôi là lười như thế hả? À? Này cái gạo lứt em hôm qua em muốn mua một bịch với Anna đúng không? Đúng rồi. Anna là bịch nào? Hả? Anna là bịch nào của ở đâu? Em để đâu? Cái bịch này là giống bịch cũ à? Đâu bịch này? Ôi đâu hết cái đồ cũ kia đi. Cái bịch này bao nhiêu tiền? Hold me, baby. I'll still just try.
Tôi nó bảo show của con Hương Giang này.
Hả?
Tôi nó bảo show của con Hương Giang ấy. Con đi tự lên một đàn cái đứa mà nó princess.
Cool mind. Whoa. I'm right a track, baby. I'm the born this way. I'm you born this way. Uống hết cái này đi Thái.
Uống từ lớn tối nè.
Thôi tối uống cái đấy hẳn cơ. Sao nó có sữa rồi? Đi tao không đấy. Đấy suốt ngày xem TikTok.
thôi. Đấy. Đúng rồi. Rồi giờ thì ăn lúc nào ấy? Anh nhắn tin lúc nào ấy?
Được.
Sao anh không đi nấu cơm đi mà anh ngồi anh bỏng với lại anh không đi gì?
Nó làm việc mà.
Anh làm việc gì?
Pleasure to meet you again. This is a great pleasure. Yesterday, we went through company evaluation, session 5.1, concentrate our interest on evaluation of biotechnology, and we tried to discuss the main points. At no time to make a summary, to make conclusions. I will keep some time in the next session, which is session 5.2 tomorrow, to do that. And tomorrow we have also electrical signal presentation, but we have only five presentations, not six as yesterday. And we have a final conclusion where I will try to identify some good practice, some warnings also in evaluation processes. Today, this is completely different, completely different session. It is on methodology. We already had together two sessions on methodology. We'll have another one, which is scheduled in December. It's not really a course, it's more to bring you some ideas to help you to structure your the process of preparing, writing, presenting, also your thesis. That means I will use some of the slides I already went through very quickly last time, and I want to concentrate more on the topic itself because this is the next step for you. You will receive, or you have received 1 or 2 hours ago, first demand, the first assignment, I would say, for each of you. And this first assignment, I try to summarize, is first to find a topic. And when you find a topic, you need a title and very often a subtitle. Okay, so you have to start from somewhere. I mean, that's not, some of you will say probably, I will find a title at the end. I say, no, find a title right now, find a subtitle. Probably you will improve the title and the subtitle later, progressively, weeks after weeks, writing, working, reading, having discussion with colleagues, making interviews. That's normal life of a thesis. So this is the first point. Second point, you will have the invest first assignment to write first draft, I would say, of what will be in the future your introduction. So of course your final introduction, final version will be rewritten, modified, restructured at the end of the process. This is what is written in some of the slides, one of the slides prepared by Professor Chan. But in research, it's much better to start that way. It's not a report, you know, it's not the kind of dissertation you went through when you were at school. So what you need is 2 pages, no more. It's short. Density, concentration, you know, is important. We don't need descriptive elements at all. And it is made, an introduction is made of 4 different paragraphs. You cannot write, or it's difficult to write, you can try, but it will be more complicated probably. For the fourth one is a presentation of different chapters, different parts. You know, some of you like to have that kind of structure on the paper, even if you move the structure afterwards. But the most important one at that stage are the 3 first paragraphs. The first paragraph, is about the definition of a topic. You have a title, you have a subtitle. Now, in a few lines, you have to explain why you choose this title and subtitle. What is also the interest of this title and subtitle? After that, you should underline or try to explain your motivation. Why did you choose this topic? Because you are working in a firm, you are working in a bank, in an insurance company, a broker, and this is a topic which is important for you, and you have an experience, you know, a professional experience. Or it is because you had in the past, you know, an academic course, session, seminar, dealing with that kind of topic, and you want to go further and to join, you know, the academic dimension and the professional dimension. This could be the second reason. It could be also because you think that it could be the opportunity for you to be specialized on something new, innovation. One of these innovation, which is restructuring, in fact, the organizations today. I think topics on fintechs, I think topics, for example, of the impact of social networks on financial markets. I think to the consequences of the modifications of the accounting system in the world. I think also to the international agreements in terms of taxes, which is up to date right now.
Mẹ chi con đánh thanh long cho thải quán hoa quả đâu.
You can decide that you use also the MEBF phases, you know, to acquire some expertise in one of these new topics. This will give you, you know, a new strength, a new asset, bring you a new asset in your professional life. So you explain what is your motivation, what is your interest, what is your motivation for this topic, and the next point, still in this first paragraph, you know, the next point is really to deal with what we call the limits of a perimeter. Very often, you know, what you think is topic is too large for a master thesis. It's more for PhD thesis, you have 3 years, you work only on that, you know, but you are working at the same time, you have families, personal, professional constraints. So in order to produce good paper, you need to reduce. I will use this word very often, reduce the size of the topic. That means that for many topics, for example, I just said a few words, you know, on this up-to-date topic, which is the international tax agreement, and you can deal with the impact of these tax agreements on some of the policies of the firms or the banks. You know, you cannot do that all over the world. You cannot find examples everywhere. You have to choose. So of course you will choose Vietnam with an international comparison, which is always very useful to have a comparison, but with 1 or 2 countries. So you will limit to Vietnam and perhaps, I don't know, to Thailand and to Taiwan. So that will be the geographical limit. You need also, very often, this is not the case in this topic, an horizon or time constraint. That means for this topic, you know, you can, even if it's not so useful here, you can say, okay, I will deal with the topic from 2018, 2023, for example. It means what's happened in the last 3 years, what will happen in the next two years to come. But you will not go back to the first negotiations, you know, in 10 years ago. So you reduce the topic. You can also reduce a topic in terms of consequences and deal only with some of the consequences of the firms, consequences of the banks, consequences for the states and taxes and budgets. You know? So reduce, limits, perimeter, what is inside, what is not inside, and don't hesitate to reduce your topic. So this is your first paragraph. When I say paragraph can be 20 lines, with no norms, there is no standard for that, but all these points, the definition, explanation of a topic, interest of a topic, motivations, perimeter and limits, should be very clear in the first paragraph. Second paragraph, you need research questions. You need research questions. Okay, I already said a few words and trying to explain that, but you know, that's a kind of elements we have to go back into or to explain again several times. What is a research question? It's a question you want, or you forecast at least, to bring element of answer at the end of your thesis. So if you raise a question, we are waiting for elements of answer. Okay. You would say, how many questions? Again, it's very simple. It's clear it's not 20.
Professor
One
Alex,
question very often is not sufficient, or it's too general.
Professor
So-
Alex, Professor,
Yeah.
yes. Do you share your screen or not? Because until now I cannot see your slide.
No, there's no slide here. It's an introduction to the first slide.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, and this is what I sent you this morning, you know.
Okay. Yes, I send for the student.
Okay, the instruction.
Yeah.
And in terms of research question, you have 2 ways to do that. You know, the first one is to have a large question, which is some kind of a general question, problematic, and then inside you'll find sub-questions. And sub-questions are more limited. And very often it's not true in any kind of topic, but they drive you to analysis with measures, quantitative elements. Okay, so an envelope question and sub-question. The second possibility is to have 2 to 4 questions, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, which are at the same level, but which are also interconnected together. So that's the two classical ways to organize your research question. You have to choose. We cannot say, even with a topic defined with a title and a subtitle, we cannot say immediately what is the best structure. You have to think about that. You have to try to think to kind of answers you can obtain. So this is very central, and it's very difficult to go further without having a first draft of research questions. The third paragraph, third paragraph is also very central, and it is on the methodologies. Taking into account your topic, the connections you have to make interviews, the material available for case studies, the databases of data you can collect one way or another. What kind of approach can you use? And the two main questions are always the same. Will you use a qualitative approach and or a quantitative approach? Some good papers use only quantitative methods, a model, for example, and some others only a qualitative approach. But it is clear that the best one generally use at the same time a quantitative and a qualitative approach. So, what kind of topics you can deal with? What are the quantitative approach you can use and develop? Of two categories. The first one is interviews. But interviews is not the kind of summary of conversation you have with someone and drinking a coffee or a tea and somewhere in Hanoi or in a given city. It is organized. It is organized either when it is a short one with an interview guide, it means 8, 10, 12 questions, no more, like you can raise in a few minutes. Very often it's done through internet or mobile, or sometimes, if you're interested in the opinion of a customer of a bank on the pavement just outside the bank, a bank branch, and you interview consumer customers when they enter or leave the building. But it can be also, and there's no contradiction, very often you use both. It can be a questionnaire, more question, more detailed, open question, closed questions. You want to catch opinion, to have an exchange with the person you interview, but also you want to get some more data. So kind of questions are different. Very often in a good qualitative analysis, you have, 10, 20, sometimes more internet guide interviews and 3, 4 very deep interviews using a questionnaire. So you have to try to to say what you want to do, what you think is feasible also. Feasibility is an important word here. Another element of qualitative approach is case study. As many of you will use a case study, very often case study in their own company or bank or whatever. And of course, case study is much more interesting if it is compared to another one. So generally, your basic case study is more important, is more detailed than the others. And the others can come from your own data collection, primary data, or it can come from secondary data. It means you have found an example, a case published in a paper, in a review, and you can use it. The only thing which is compulsory is to say where it is coming from, what is the review, who is the author of this study you use. So that's really the two main elements for qualitative approach. And you will say if you use also quantitative approach or quantitative approach for a very, very large number of quantitative approach. And students, in finance, they think first always to regression. They say, okay, we had a course in statistics and probability and decision making, and we will apply what we learned, which is good, very positive reaction. And they say, okay, if we collect a few data, we'll try to find a way to calculate, to use regression, linear regression in general, to interpret the quality of a regression. And after that, if it is possible to obtain some kind of correlations, okay, which is one way. But we have others, because we have many models. If you have a look, and we'll come back on that later, to past phases written by students from preceding intakes, you will see, for example, that in quantitative method we have scoring methods. Scoring approach. It's not so far in terms of kind of quantitative method. It's based on discriminant analysis, and you have a presentation on that. Discriminant analysis use ratios generally, and formulas which are weighted average or weighted score calculated with these ratios. This is what we call scoring method or scores, and on the quantitative basis, this is based on discriminant analysis. This is so regression, correlation, scoring techniques are very familiar to students, and they have been used in the past, and you can use them again. For those more interested, for example, in M&A, generally we have almost a few students interested in topics with M&A, they think immediately to what we call event studies. It means what are the reactions of the stock market, investors, prices, when there is an announcement of an acquisition, announcement of a merger. What's happened? So we have a very well-known technique, which is kind of statistic technique again, which is called event studies. Not very difficult. We find some software, free software, to deal with that. This is very common. some of you probably will be interested in going back to more traditional portfolio analysis using one of the main model, like the Sharpe model or Markowitz model or the APT approach or the French three factors models. So in portfolio management, it can be applied, of course, to stock market, but it can be applied to bonds, it can be applied to other topics also. We find many quantitative approaches. We had a few, with last intake, we had a topic on management of operational working capital. It means management of the inventory, payable, receivables, that kind of thing. And we have models, which are very well known in the literature and which can be used and applied also. So this is just to give you some examples, for working capital, for M&A, for liquidity solvency risk, score techniques, or the large applications, very large applications of regressions and correlations. But you have to say what you want to do in terms of methodology, qualitative and quantitative before going forward. It doesn't mean it will not be modified. It will not change, but you have to start from somewhere. Perhaps you start saying, okay, I'm going to start with case study comparison. I will validate my result with 2 interviews, and I will use a model, which is a model of events based on event studies. And you read, you progressively, you know better the literature, and you understand that that kind of situation, you can also use regressions, OLS regression, for example. So you can come back, you can make a loop, and come back to the introduction and modify the introduction, generate to integrate more tools of analysis than you expected at the beginning. So, title, subtitle, the 3 main paragraphs of the introduction, second point, and third, a reference list. Few students every year, they say it's not useful to have a reference list. And generally after that, we don't have a very good thesis. Because if you want to start on a topic, you have to know what is written, what has been written. At what stage is the knowledge today? The only way to do that is first to identify the main references available, professional and academic, to make a list, okay, and then to read at least the best element in the list. That's what I already explained in one of the 2 preceding sessions. So this is a compulsory way to go further. Don't start writing, don't start making analysis before you are very clear on the introduction, on the reference list, and you read at least part of this reference list. I gave you already, but I think it's useful to repeat that. Very, very quickly, you will, on many topics, you will get 50, 60 references. You have no time to read all that. So my advice is very simple. Read all the abstracts. Read all the abstracts. And after reading all the abstracts, make a selection in order to keep a reasonable number of references. there is no standard again. But generally we say about 15 is quite okay. If you make a good choice among the 60, you keep 15, okay? And with 15, you probably find the best, or at least those references which are the most useful for you, most useful according to what you want to do with your topic. Then third step, reference list 60, read the abstract, second point, make a selection, third point, and now you read the selected articles or books or reports. You have to spend time on that. It's really compulsory as a step. And the next and last step coming from reference, but it is for second step. Remember what I did in my preceding presentation, is to identify the main idea. And generally, the main idea, you get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but not 15 and not 1. And the literature review will give a presentation of these ideas. And we have time to come back on that. So what I'm waiting from you now is a short paper with title, subtitle, a draft of introduction, list of references, and if you are able to do that, the selection of the references you want to keep for going further. It means for the preparation and writing of your literature review. So this is the first thing I wanted to say today. This is your first assignment, and you will receive, or you have received, a mail from Mrs. Twillin on that point. I want to have these draft before the last session, because I want to use them to bring you some kind of feedback on that. And you will have also individual feedback. You will have collective, global feedback, but also individual feedbacks. This was also, it is your assignment, but it is also, I would say, a kind of introduction to the slides you see in front of you. I went through very quickly through that slide last time, and it's advices or suggestions on the choices you will do for this first paper and for the next steps. First point here. Be be careful to topics which are too descriptive. A description is not a thesis. It could be of interest. You present something which is new. You explain how it works. For example, blockchain. You heard about blockchain. I have good topics around blockchain. But explanation of what is blockchain, where this technology is coming from, how it works on a technological point of view, what are even the best application today. It could be very, very interesting, for an article in a financial economic journal. For professional, but it's not a thesis. On the contrary, if you take blockchain and the applications in your bank, in what part of the activities of the bank blockchain's application would be useful, brings more safety, security, productivity, speed, also would be one of the question or sub-question. One also about blockchain and the interconnection between the operations of different departments of the banks. This is another question. How to integrate your network of large customers or of subsidiaries or correspondents in different countries could be one of the interesting questions. How to integrate blockchain in portfolio management and in services offered to customers, which is a main issue today. So you will not deal with all these questions, but you will select 2 or 3 of them and use them, present them, develop them in the second paragraph of your introduction, because they can be good research questions. In some of the presentations, we find also descriptive parts, which are good summaries, what we find in textbook. If you do something on M&A, you don't need to explain what is an acquisition, what is a merger, why we have M&A, how they are generally financed, what are means of payments, and so on. This is supposed to be known. We'll talk about that in the M&A course. This has to be presented, in a course. This is available in the textbooks. This is not part of a research paper, not part of a thesis. So, of course, you are supposed to know what is already written in the best textbook. And there's a very good chapter on M&A in Burke and DeMarzo. But this has not to be summarized in 10 pages in a thesis. The only thing you can do in a thesis is to put somewhere reference to Burke and DeMarzo pages within chapter. So be very careful to descriptive topics. We need questions. We need really questions. We need questions, and we are looking for some kind of results of contribution. Second point, I come back, in fact, to content of the assignment. A title every year, few students, and two, of course, they are writing title which are 3 lines. Title is not 3 lines. Title is very short. It could be 3, 4, 5 words, no more. If you think, it's not clear, you can add a subtitle. You can have a subtitle on blockchain in the banks. What are the what are the applications of blockchain in the banking system? But put a subtitle, portfolio management, currency transaction, and subsidiary management. So it will be short, and if we need to reduce more, to focus more, you have a subtitle, and this is very important to understand. Point 4, it's a kind of, I repeat that again, but anyway, we have to repeat that. And very often, even after 2 or 3 months, we said to the students, this is too large. You have no time to do that. No, you have only a few months to write your thesis. You don't have 3 years. You are not full-time students. So you reduce again. So a limited reduced perimeter is really compulsory. And one of the goal of research director is clearly to obtain from the student a sufficient reduction of the size of the topic in order to obtain, something which is a good quality paper at the end. And what you find here again is what I explained a few minutes ago, and already said that before. Reduction means limits, quantitative limits. We can find different limits, but anyway, always deal with basic limits. Period of time. Is it a picture in 2021? Is it an evolution and forecast from 2018-2023? Is it only Vietnamese? I think it's not good, but it cannot be worldwide. It could be Vietnamese plus some other country, some other examples outside Vietnam. And for some of them, for example, blockchain, we think to a bank, but the topic, is also a very good topic for insurance companies. It's also something you can study in some industries. So anyway, you have to reduce. You can then deal at the same time with banking system, the insurance sector, the different non-financial activities. You have to make choices. So, for example, it could be 2018-2021 in Vietnam with a comparison to Thailand and Taiwan, in the retail banks. So that's very interesting and important point for writing your introduction, which is the first point. A few points here, which are warnings. So you have your assignment. We went through these first element here, first elements on the limits, reduction, title, subtitle, so on. Now a few warnings, and we come back to research questions. I had several students, this year, they wanted to use case study, and generally case study, of course, was the case study of their bank or company. I said, no, this is not a topic. Clearly, it's not a topic. It could be, used. The case of your bank, the case of your company can be used as a case study. But the question raised are not questions on your company. They are more general. If I come back to my blockchain example, we deal with blockchains in retail banks in Vietnam with a comparison to Thailand and Taiwan, and we'll say, okay, of course you can use your own bank if you are in the Vietnam Bank or Vietcombank, another one, Military Bank, whatever. Okay, but it's not. Topic is not blockchain in my bank. My bank is a case study. Perhaps the most important case study used in my in my thesis, but it cannot be completely centered on your bank or your own company. So be very careful. This happens very often, and it means that in that kind of situation, the thesis very often is not a thesis; it's more kind of very good report after an internship, and this is completely different. It means you don't reach the goal in that kind of situation. You have the same for the models. We have very often, applications of models, because of course in finance and you find many quantitative models, analysis, and students coming background, good background in math, for example, they are willing to apply the techniques, the tools, models they have known, who have learned, in financial application. So that's happened very often in portfolio management. You find special experts, student experts in pharma, French, 3 factors models with all the sub-models which have been created, designed, presented, and tested after pharma and French. And they want to apply pharma and French. So their thesis become pharma French models applications in finance. It's not how it could be presented. You can use a pharma French model, but to deal as a quantitative approach, 2 research questions, which are research questions in a financial topic. So it's a financial topic, a research question. In the research question, you think that with the research question, you think that among the methodologies available in the quantitative part, pharma French model application could be useful. So this happens very often with portfolio management, and particularly with pharma French model or the APT model. That's happened also very often, with something which is well known by good quantitative students, which is the ARCH models. You have family of ARCH models, and they like, to use different ARCH models on a problem and to show what are the differences in the results because of the structure and hypotheses behind the models. This is not a thesis in finance. You can use ARCH models, but as a tool. A good thesis, a good topic is not a topic on how to apply and to compare different models, quantitative models, which have been published in many different journals with many different applications. A third weakness, a third warnings is about the country. Vietnam, is a large country, not a number of inhabitants. A good example of growth, development, but it's not the only country in the world. And when you deal in your country with a topic, you need comparables, you need benchmarks. You need to find countries which are, let's say, similar, at least at some points. Very often, it's much better if they are a little more advanced, because you find the elements of the success and the failures you can use in your own analysis and recommendation. But anyway, you have to open the windows. you have to look outside. You have to make comparisons. You have to be careful to the difficulties we have found, and to also, on the positive side, to a good practice you can obtain from these foreign experiences. This is what you have really clearly to do. Okay, so be very careful. Don't do or don't design a topic which is only an application of a quantitative model on a bank in Vietnam without any kind of comparison with outside. Be very careful also to the very well-known topic or topic which are studied by many research institutes, international institutions, because a large number of articles have already been published, high quality results. And it's difficult to bring something new. I mean, we ask for a contribution. The contribution can be very limited. It's a master thesis, it's not a PhD thesis. But we need something which few pages with approach, results, something which has not been done before. Okay. But on very well-known topics, and particularly on topic in microfinance, it's very difficult to find new niches. Each year I have 2 or 3 students, in VMABF and other programs in France or in Europe, and they want to deal with microfinance. Last year in Paris, I had students who wanted, to write a thesis on the French state debt. It's quite interesting, 3,000 billion euros. But what to do? This is studied every day by teams of economists in the French Ministry of Finance, in Brussels at the European level, in international institutions like the IMF or like the OECD, or like banks in Basel, international banks, banks for international settlements. So they have models, they have large databases, they have the experts. There is no room, clearly, there is no room for a good master thesis. There is room for a course. There is no room for a master thesis. So be very careful to those topics which are studied all over the world, which are in the media, but also studied in details by year after year, or day after day, by a large team of experts. Be also very careful to the up-to-date topics, and the typical topic we had, proposed by students. It was true in Vietnam, it was true in France, and the same problem with German students, and the same problem even in another part of the world, it's students in Dakar, in Senegal. And all these students, they wanted to study the consequences of the pandemic. Some of them, it's what are the consequences of the pandemic, or the CFOs policies, or the tools used to forecast the future and to design the budgets in the companies, or some of them were wanted to deal with the impact on the financial structure of non-financial companies. What's the problem? The problem is you start now with that kind of topic, and you will have a final version in a few months. We don't even know when the pandemic will be over. We expect and we hope, of course, that the pandemic will be over in a few months, but we are not sure. That's exactly the situation we had when we were here in the summer 2020. We said, okay, another 3 months and it will be over. We are by the end of 2021 right now. So that means you are running after your topic. You are running after the data, because each day something new happens on your topic. You are not writing for a newspaper, or you are not making a presentation every morning, at breakfast on the TV. You are dealing with a topic. You get the data, or you can collect the data, and you are not in a situation you can be every morning collecting new data because something happened on your topic during the night. So, these are up-to-date topics. It's true, for example, for pandemic, but it's also true for some topics, for example, on oil impact. I can take a topic, what is the impact of a return of some categories of farm economic sectors from 2015, 2018, but never try in that kind of master thesis to say what is the impact up to now of the oil price on some elements of financial policy or strategy of the banks or the non-financial company. Too risky, too difficult to do that. So that's a few warnings in your choice of topic. So this is more summary or detailed summary on research questions. And if you read that, you will see that I came back on some of these, or introduced some of these points in my presentation of your assignment. Okay. For example, of course, the thesis should start with research questions, and there's a reason why it is in your first assignment. And this means what are the questions you want to answer at the end of your thesis. Point 2, I wrote here that research question can be organized in 2 different ways, either with an envelope and some question, or with 2 to 4 questions connected together. I came back on the warning, point 3. It's not to introduce a descriptive presentation. And we have here, point 4, but it should be simple, easy to read, understandable by the reader. Always think I should advise, think to the reader. There's someone who will read you, at least your professors. And don't forget that in classical thesis could be useful, depends on the topic. Research questions are followed by hypotheses. When you have a topic, you have research question, and after that you make a hypothesis. And what you do through the methodology is to try to test the hypothesis. But anyway, in point 6 here, in some proposals, there is no research question. Major modifications are needed, in that case. So that means you can have, in some cases, research question without hypothesis, but there is no thesis without research questions. Again, it's a part of summary, summarize partly what I said. You can use several methodologies, point one, or you can use one, it depends on the topic. But generally, those with at least two different methodologies show higher quality. And those with quantitative plus qualitative are the best ones. So that's point one and point two. Few words, point three on interviews. That's what I explained a few minutes ago. But point four, perhaps you didn't catch this idea. Interviews can be used to collect information. I mean, you are staying outside the bank, you have an interview guide, you have 10 questions, and you're trying to catch customers getting of the bank, of the branch, and you raise your question. You collect information. Interview can be used also to validate results, and this is very recommended, particularly when you have quantitative. I mean, you have made analysis, you have case studies, you have a model, and at the end you present your results, you discuss your results, and to validate them, what do? You go back to one or two experts or professionals. You explain what you did, what are your results, and you want to catch their reaction. Do they agree? Do they agree to all your results, part of them? Do they bring some contradiction? What kind of contradiction or opposite result? So this is the validation step. The validation step is one or two interview face to face. And this is very useful to measure the quality of the contribution of a thesis. Another point here, point 5, which is raised very often, at least by some students, it depends again very much on the topic. Data collected can be used or analyzed with, let's say, quantitative methods, a model. You have are working on M&A again, and you have identified a few M&A operations. You collect the data on the performance, on the price, on the volatility, liquidity in the market, if they are listed. You apply your even study model, then you find the results. That is a classical presentation. But you have also a few interviews. It means for same companies, for example, you have the opportunity to meet 2 or 3 CFOs, and they explain you what are large bid, or how did they react to the hostile operation launched against their company. And very often, if you are able, to get the words used, it means to collect the sentences pronounced by them. The most interesting point is to work on the words, on what we call the verbatim. How do they explain? How do they present their reaction? How do they present the decision-making process which result was a bid. And we have techniques to analyze words, sentences, interview, and to be able to write verbatim. It's very often even more interested in the application of quantitative methods. So you have to think about that also. All these elements, and they will have to be collected and presented somehow and somewhere. Each time you have got an interview, each interview should be summarized in an appendix. Generally, it's appendix 3. And of course, the material can be presented according to the structure of your analytical part in your thesis. Same way, questionnaires and interview guides should be presented in the same appendix and explain. Why did you raise 25 questions in your questionnaire with 10 open questions and the other one closed questions? That kind of thing. So it's really a few points on methodology you have to think about very clearly. So you will have to remind on quantitative methods a few words on the quantitative techniques, point 2, point 1 and 2. You'll find also something here which is on scenario and simulation, which is very useful when you have a topic on project management and project finance. And now we go into example of topics. One of the topics which is of interest in many countries, and it is, of course, it's obvious it is in Vietnam. It's how to finance financial engineering, financial management of infrastructure projects. Okay. And of course, infrastructure projects are very complex. And you have different scenarios of the metro line, of the train station, of the airports, of the structure of size, of new hospitals, and so on. So you need scenarios, and after that simulation of the different potential development of a project, and after that simulation of the financials, engineering financial structure behind. So scenario simulation techniques, and we have tools to do that, It's something which is not very used by your preceding colleagues in the MEBF program. But at the time we study more and more these public-private financing techniques, on large projects in countries, and probably Vietnam is one of them, with infrastructure development. Infrastructure is very large. It's not only trains, it's motorways, highways, airports, hospitals, for example. It's very different operations. It's very useful. So think also to these scenario simulation techniques. Post point 4, we already went through that set of criteria. That's what we did, on the financial plan, for example. Don't forget also that secondary data is welcome. You can always use secondary data, but you have to say where you collected this data. When you try to make explanations and comparisons, also point 5, don't forget all the elements of differentiation between the countries, laws, geography and climate, culture, for example, taxes, environment, tax environment also. You will find some element I said a few words on again. Reference list is compulsory, one of priority. It's easy today to find, but most of the topics, a large number of references. You have platforms, you have websites. Don't hesitate, to go to the website of large international institutions like the IMF, like the EU, like central banks, like the OECD and some others, regional banks. And don't forget also that we have websites where management, financial, banking journals are listed, and with many of the articles published in these journals available. You have the references at CFVG. For this reference list, which is one of the points of the assignment, you have to present them, to organize, as we say them, according to the international norms, international standards, or Harvard standards. So it is a very specific way to make a presentation of a book, of an article, of a report. It's not exactly the same. The last name is the most important element to rank a reference. In each category, if you make a distinction between academic references, professional references, books, websites, in each category, the ranking by last names or the author is the classical rule. If you don't know what are the international norms or the Harvard norms, just go to a good academic review, or just go on internet and just type international norms or Harvard norm for references, and you find the details. And my advice is start your reference list applying these rules, because when we're at the beginning, it's easy to apply. If you have to come back 15 days before the end of the process of preparing the final version, you have no time, you don't remember what you read, it's a nightmare. Point 5 is just what I explained, and point 6 also. So you have a good summary presentation of all these elements. Okay. So you have last 2 slides here. Perhaps a few words anyway on these last 2 slides. And this is the beginning of step 2. It means if you are already advanced on step 1, title, subtitle, introduction, 3-paragraph, reference list, international norms, you can move to step 2. And generally step 2, you have 2 chapters. The first one is, or the second one, the order can be discussed later. What you can do with your reference lists after reading the abstracts, making a selection of the best references, reading them, identifying also the most important ideas, is to follow what is written here. That's my advice. The literature review is not a list of articles or summaries of articles. It's not the article by Smith, Journal of Finance, 2015. It's a good article. I make a summary. This is not that at all a literature review. It doesn't mean you will not use this article and present some other elements of the article inside the literature review, but the structure of the literature review will be made around the main ideas developed by the authors. Since you have been reading the selected references, 15, you find 6 ideas. You present idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, 4, 5, 6, and for each of them, you say, who are the main authors? What were the research questions? What were their methodologies, databases, case studies, results? So you present the contribution of the main authors for each idea. So this is very important to understand. When you have done this, you have written a few pages of literature review with 6 ideas, introducing for each of them the main authors, their research questions, their methodologies, their results. You have improved your situation. First, you have a good knowledge of literature. And with a good knowledge of literature, research questions, methodology, it will be possible to start with the first step. It means the analytical chapter, not before. Don't start writing. Probably you will identify new research questions and methodologies. You will also, and you are always allowed, to use the research question found by other authors. There is no intellectual property ownership on research question and on methodology. So you can modify, you can enrich, you can improve your own introduction, adding research question and methodologies. And there is a kind of loop. You have to start from somewhere, but you are, of course, allowed. There is place for loops, improvement of your research questions and methodologies. More, you generally find at this level, when it is well done, new material, case studies, databases, which will be very useful for you in the analytical part. You can use them. Remember what I said. As long as you say where they are coming from, who is the author, and what is the journal, what is the publisher, and so on. And you find also results. And at the end of your study, when you will present your results after the analytical part, which is step 3 and step 4, your results presentation, you have to discuss and you have to validate. And validate means mainly to compare your results with the results of the other authors. It can be also, as we said, to present your result to an expert or professional. So this is very central, and you cannot go further. You cannot go inside the topic at a good level without doing that. Last slide here. Just a few words in order you understand what is the structure up to the last step. So step 3 is the analytical part. You have the literature review, which is the main part of step 2. Very often you have a descriptive chapter, which is a context environment. It should not be too long, but it is a possibility to explain in more detail what is the topic, why it is so important, as you said in the introduction, and what are the questions raised for future and the implications of this topic. But this is in step 2 with a literature review. Step 3, the analytical part. You have 2, 3, 4 chapters, it depends, it can be structured according to the ideas you found in the literature review, according to your research questions also, or according to the methodology you use. Sometimes you have a chapter with quantitative models, another one with interview, and the third one on case studies. But it's one possibility you don't know at the beginning. You don't know before having written step 1 and step 2, how the analytical part, which is the more important at the end, how it is organized. Here what you find is a few elements of the results. Results are step 4, and results have to be presented. And if you have done the job properly before, you have, of course, introduction and you have conclusion to each chapter, whatever they are. Step 2, step 3. And the results, global results presentations, it's for the largest part, the reorganization, explanation of the main points of your partial conclusion of each chapter. It means if you say at the end of each chapter, I want to summarize and present the 3 main ideas, you take the 3 main ideas of a different chapter, let's say 5 or 6, for example, you get 15 ideas. You reorganize, restructure this presentation, you explain in more details, and you underline also some important elements like the financial resources needed, the human resources needed, or the prerequisite between the different results. After that, results should be discussed. And there is room for discussion, discussion, it's like discussing on a topic with a friend or a colleague, there is no method for that. There is no method, there is no model. Just discuss. Could be very short. You underline the main points, what you found and what you thought before, you compare. What you find and what is generally found in the literature. It's more, a state of the different opinions and results than anything else. On 3, this is more serious, in fact, it is validation, And I repeat, you have 2 validations to go through if you want to have a good validation. The first one will be the comparison of your results contribution with the one or the authors you used to develop the ideas of in the chapter on literature review. But you have also to validate your result by 1 or 2 interviews with experts and professionals. This is step 4. But now it will depend very much on the topic. Let's say some topics are more scientific, some others are more consulting. And in case you have a topic which is a thesis, but with some kind of consulting dimensions, you need some kind of recommendations. And generally what we do, we create a new chapter, in fact, step 5, new chapter, which is the presentation of a recommendation. It could be a recommendation to a CFO, it could be a recommendation to management of the bank, it could be a recommendation to Ministry of Finance, depends very much on the topic. But you have recommendation to different players involved in that topic. So then you have to get the structure in your mind, and then to start with the assignment. When you will have written the assignment, you will be at the end of step 1. Then we will move to step 2, and then to step 3. Don't start writing chapter, which is in step 4, before writing the introduction, please, and going through the reference list. There is an order in this process to prepare, to write, and to defend a thesis. This is what I wanted to show you here in this approach. Now you received, and it is, I think it is in Compass. I don't have access to Compass, so it's a bit difficult here. But I decided with my colleagues and with Mrs. Twilin, Miss Tram, to select a few phases in order you understand what is a thesis, how it is written, and what are the phases we have, given a good grade. And you will find a few one on Canvas. They were introduced today by Mrs. Twilin, Mrs. Tram. So it is the final version of a few phases there. I give you an example here. I have on my other screen here, and which is a good thesis. It's quite it's quite a difficult topic. It's on transfer prices, implementation of fund transfer pricing at Vietnam International Bank VIB. It's the answer, in fact, at the beginning of the question, where it's very often by the student the number of pages. Here it is 70 pages thesis, but 70 pages include everything. It means not only the core, but also a few pages before the core, and the pages also after the core, which means after the core, the reference list, which means also the different appendices. Okay, and you will see that here we are nearly in line with all what we said. There's perhaps some small mistakes, but it's very limited. It's well presented, it is well structured, and you will find on the difficult topic all the points which are underlined in my presentation. This is a very good example. You will find also now this one was maybe 15 and maybe 14, something which is very quantitative. And a discussion with these students. At the time, we have 2 students per thesis, which is not the case since 2016. since Index 16. It's on risk quantification by expected loss model. Expected loss models are quite complex in math, and they are used very often in insurance. An application in credit operation and management of banks. So, you know, you are here in a good example of interaction between knowledge and development of model, which calls the expected loss model, and something which is much more classical, which is credit operation and management of banks. And of course, the topic for us in this program, in ABF program, is on credit operation and management of banks. And the question is, what can bring the application, the use of a model, in that case, the expected loss model, to a problem which is a classical problem in a bank. It's not, we are expert of models because we have, for example, studied the models in an insurance company, and we want to find an application of the expected loss model, and we have chosen to extend our application outside insurance, and because it's not so far, and we have data also, we have decided to apply then to banks, banking system, and mainly to credit operation. It is the other way around. And if you read this paper, you will understand that they have understood what is a thesis in finance, which is not an application in finance of a model, but which is first a financial question, and in the methodology used, we can use, among other methodologies, a specific model, which is the expected loss model. To come back to my question about length, you will see here that it is a longer structure. It's 91 pages, but taking into account all the pages also which are before the introduction and after the conclusion. We have among those I sent you here, we had an international thesis, which is on fund transfer pricing, the implementation of fund transfer pricing. So you can see here introduction of this dimension, and we have a very classical topic, the management, evaluation and management of the liquidity interest rate in bank, and there is another one about 70 pages. So you have here a few examples, and if we find some others uncovered. Let's give you, nothing is perfect, I would say. They are not perfect, but they are good. They validated most of the goals, they reach these goals, they understood the warnings, and they produced good quality paper. Now that's what I wanted to show you here. Now this was for the few examples. This was again for the assignments with the applications, some consequences which are summarized in these comments on topics, from definitions to topic, to limits, excuse me, which are what we call here presentation 86. Okay. So next, I want to come back on a few examples of topics, could be very useful for you. So it's never, it's not a limited list. It's not compulsory to choose one of these topics, but I want you to understand that we have a large number of potential topics. I just already said a few words on the topic which are dangerous, are either they are too common, or they are up to date, or they are too difficult, or there is nearly no more contribution to bring because they have been studied regularly day after day by international institutions, for example. So this is what I wanted to do. So now let's have a short break, something to like 5, 7, 8 minutes. And after that, we'll move again on topics with another presentation, which is presentation 68. And I will give you also some more ideas of topics I collected for you. So we have a short break. Thank you very much. Elle était là? Elle était là maman, puis elle est partie. Je sais pas comment on appelle. Oui, alors j'ai essayé de changer là.
Qu'est-ce que tu as essayé de changer?
Bah, j'ai fini, si tu veux, je vais très lentement en fait. Beaucoup
Oui.
longtemps que je ne pensais, c'est
Oui,
pas grave
oui,
ça.
oui.
Donc j'ai fait mon 86 et je veux maintenant le 68 qui doit
Oui.
être celui-là.
Oui.
J'ai essayé de le mettre, voilà ce que ça
marche
donne.
pas. Alors attends.
Je te rentre là.
C'est le 88 que tu veux.
Non, c'est le 80, c'est le 68. Tu dois être sur le 68, hein, Topics Quality.
Alors ça, c'est quoi ça? C'est 68?
Celui que tu vois là à l'écran, c'est 68.
Few Comments, ça, c'est 68.
Dans Topics Quality.
Non, mais, et ça?
Ça, c'est celui que j'avais avant, c'est 86.
D'accord.
Ça, j'en veux plus.
Mm.
Tu me le fais. Tu me le fais
Et
pas.
ça?
Ça, c'est pour après, Oral Structure.
C'est le 88.
Ça,
ça.
c'est 80, c'est ce que je veux. Ça va
Et
être ma conclusion.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux alors,
Là, je veux maintenant le 68, celui qui s'appelle Topic
Oui,
Quality.
ben voilà.
Voilà. Et je finirai tout à l'heure
Mm.
par l'autre.
Voilà, il
Je
est
pense
là.
qu'il ne faudra même pas les autres.
Il est là, tu vois. Ok, c'est bon. C'est ça.
Pourquoi je n'ai pas en plein écran à nouveau?
En plein écran, mais c'est parce que c'est pas un problème, on va le mettre en plein écran. C'est parce que je voulais te laisser l'autre derrière.
Ah, d'accord. Voilà. Non, je pense que ça va aller.
Ok.
Que je remette au conduit?
Oui. J'ai fait mes réservations. Bon, on regardera ça tout à l'heure.
Ça, normalement, c'est à jour.
Alors, départ le 3, parce que c'est un cours le 2. Je vais partir
Attends.
la
Oui.
rondeur.
Ça va, ça va.
Et on revient le lundi 13.
13.
Hmm.
Ah oui, donc je fais ça là-bas.
Hmm.
Ouais.
Voilà. Ah là,
Ah,
c'est quoi ça?
j'ai des soutenances.
Ah.
Ça fait un peu d'après-midi.
Non, c'était libre chez moi, mais je vais regarder. Je peux le changer.
Il faut que tu changes. Après, quand je peux changer.
Je rentre le dimanche alors.
Oui, ou mardi.
Ah non, mais le lundi, j'ai un sac de lecture.
Bon, il faut rentrer le matin. C'est 14h, c'est en ligne.
Tu me fais partir de bonne heure aussi.
Et puis tu vas te changer tes prix.
Ouais.
Okay. So we had a short break, and I think it's time, to start again. And what I want to do right now, after this first part on the assignment and first element, on the topic, on main rules, on the steps to go through. I want to go back on the choice of topics. Just because I want to escape to these mistakes I mentioned in the warning lists, and also I think you should try to invest new fields, which are the fields of the future. It means topics which will allow you to learn something more than your present experience. We already had a quick look on this slide, but I will add some other topics. Here, I'm very interested by the two first slides. Be very careful to the quality of a topic in terms of feasibility. Feasibility. Already said a few words on that. For example, here you have the first slide. I hope you see my slide. Again, if you don't see my slide, just tell me you don't see my slide, and I think it's okay. It's number 68 in the presentation numbers. There's one topic which is very difficult. I have students working on that for a thesis, a doctoral thesis, which is dividend policies in airlines. Why is it so difficult? Because, what's happened to the airlines with the pandemic. So the only way to do that is to have a long horizon. But to get a long horizon and interesting comparison, you need information, data on many different companies, and you need long-term data which are comparable. Which means it's really a difficult topic in terms of quantitative, for the quantitative part. It also requires interview they react to different crises, and not only pandemic, but before terrorism, before the SWAT, before political risk, and so on. So, good topic of interest to validate the academic knowledge, but very difficult to go through, even for a doctoral student with 3 years to go through. I already said what I think on topics on pandemic, 0.5. So be very difficult, be very cautious with this kind of topic. Same for number 7, which is a kind of international long-term topic studied by state, regional, international teams, research team of international economic institutes, and so on. There is no room for master students there. Okay. On the contrary, you find topics which are quite easy to go through, but what can be brought is very limited, to be very careful. Credit risk management in banks, I have hundreds of master theses on that. what can be your contribution? Same on controlling banks and insurance companies. Okay. Now, if you move to second slide, you find topics where you can find new contributions, good, interesting contributions, and build also your field of expertise or a field of expertise for your future. Of course, what is green? I will come back with some of the examples, but green, you know, it is up to date, and it can be green bonds, it can be increased choices, investment policies, green customers. So, of course, we had many articles published, but there's still room, and there is a demand now for experts in the companies, in the banks, with knowledge on this green dimension. Dividend policy is more and more a topic. Of course, you have all these classical models you find in Burke and DeMazo, with nothing to do with that. But the problem is what should be a percentage of net earnings distributed to the classical shareholders, to the staff and workers, and the part also kept into the fund through retained earnings. And in the bank, of course, you have a discussion about the tax rate. So today, this discussion is back. How to split into pieces the net earnings before taxes between the different categories of players. And we have experiences all around the world at the level of the countries, but also at the level of companies. And this topic, which was a bit old, 5 or 10 years ago, it's back, and it's again a new topic, which has to be studied. Of course, you have many topics around fintechs, particularly for those of you working in banks. You know, I think all these fintechs coming in, you know, of course, on the means of payments, but not only on the means of payments now. There are also portfolio management, for example. They are on insurance distribution. There are on some other questions also of interest for the banking system and the insurance system. So around fintech, banks and insurance company, you find a large number of topics. What you find also is topics all around the world on fintechs and banks and insurance company. What kind of relations? Are they competitors only? Are they do they develop common joint ventures? Have contracts of services? Do banks and insurance companies buy and integrate part of the fintechs? Why? Or take minority stake? And of course, for the financial sector, is something which is very central. What you can have a look also is those fintechs working on cryptocurrencies with technologies which are not very well known by classical banks and classical insurance companies at the same time. And even fintechs working with central banks, which want to introduce, central bank currencies, new types. So around these new players, you have a lot of topics which could be of interest and which will develop very quickly in many countries. And this is a good investment for you, as green bonds are, as green dimension, green financing, green investment, green bonds, green organizations are. I will recommend also to be interested or to invest in M&A. M&A, is crucial for growing economies. So that means it's not difficult to forecast, but the number of M&A operations will increase in Vietnam in the years to come. Between banks and insurance companies, but also, of course, between non-financial companies. So nearly all the categories of legal structure in the financial and non-financial system will be involved one way or another in M&A operation. So there's a lot to do around regulation, around the techniques used in acquisition operation, after that in mergers, but also in appendix element like share buyback or split. There is probably also a good topic there. I think that when you deal with M&A, you are also should have a look to other topics which are connected, like rumors. What about rumors on the value of companies? So you understand that there is a connection between valuation topics and acquisitions and mergers. Okay, and on valuation you find the topic with a connection between valuation as it can be measured to the market using, for example, even studies, and rumors. So it's a topic which is the limit of classical quantitative topic given studies, classical M&A, but also which is more which is also connected to psychology, to behavior of the different players. And you find many articles published at the moment in many countries on that topic. So as I know, there is nothing in Vietnam, but you can check. If it is Vietnamese, I cannot find them. And probably there is some kind of topic you can go through here. I will also recommend, topics around, I would say, financial organization in companies, in non-financial companies in general, accounting rules and the applications, and how Vietnamese firms can be in the international standards very quickly, integrating completely, the norms, standards, IFRS, and so on. Second element here is about the modifications, progressive modification of the financial organizations of the firms. Where are we? What could happen in the years to come? What is brought by the experience from international firms? So point 4 is accounting, and consequences accounting, of course. But it's also more generally financial organization in firms, and more specifically for Vietnamese firms working with international companies, having joint ventures with international companies, or for some of them, and it will be more and more the case, having subsidiaries outside Vietnam. How to organize the financial department of a group. I never had a paper on that in MBBF. Of course, we can go back to classical one topic, which is NPL loans, yeah, and risk associated. And what could be of interest if you are involved in that kind of topic is a comparison between Vietnam and other countries. Comparison. What were the problems raised? Why did we have problems? What were the policies and the solution? How successful they are if you compare them between different countries in different period of times. So there's still room for that. We have many papers, there's still room for that kind of topic. I recommend also topics on infrastructure, that's what I said. We have new techniques coming in, what we call PPP, BOT, and it is, in my opinion, clear that this technique will be developed and applied in Vietnam more and more in the years to come, because the number of projects to finance is quite important, and the amount needed, and also financial engineering, the knowledge in financial engineering, which is needed, is not complete 100% available, I would say. So I recommend really clearly to develop topics on infrastructure engineering and legal bodies in the railways, in the airports, in the hospital, in freeways, and so on. Room for that. This topic is moving, and it's a kind of knowledge which is a good field of expertise. Partly for those of you interested by infrastructure and interested by relations and jobs in international institutions, international banks. There's room here. Consumer lending market. Clearly, in Vietnam, we have a great opportunity to develop this market. Consumer lending institutions with all the services which can be brought to the consumer, not only the lending borrowing operation. So that's very clear. Another one is about financial platforms and crowdfunding, with questions. What is brought by throwing experience? Is it a solution to finance some operation of companies, growing companies mainly, or real estate projects? as it is done in some other countries. How to run financial platform or regulate financial platform and crowdfunding operations. Behind this, as we found with many complex financial techniques, is to regulate that. But to regulate means they have to be allowed. If it is thought it is very useful, but the regulator should limit the risk, particularly for the small investors. So this is very, very good news. I will add some other topics. I had in the past a few theses on real estate, but we can have more on how to finance real estate project, not only infrastructure. It could be leisure resource, that kind of thing. For example, it could be also urban projects, buildings, could be a tower. Real estate can be also analyzed around the players. What are the players today in the real estate sector? What's happened? Concentration, internationalization. Who is dominating the sector? We can compare to other countries. What's happened with growth? So real estate is clearly insurance as a rule. Insurance is still not very developed in Vietnam compared to many other countries, and we know generally that in average, the premium collected by insurance company everywhere in the world grow at a speed which is twice the growth rate of the country. So, that means that in Vietnam, for the next years, there is a potential growth of insurance premium, which is very high. So that means that the power of insurance company will increase. So how to manage this premium? How to manage the risk associated? How to use the technologies to maximize return on this cash. Remember that insurance companies are very similar in terms of finance to the distribution sector. I mean, when you go to a supermarket, you pay cash at the exit. But the supermarket pay the providers 60 days after. It's the same for insurance company. You want to be insured for your car, you pay a premium. And if you get a crash, perhaps you will be paid back by the insurance company, but it will be 6 months later, 9 months later. Okay. So these two economic sectors have large amount of cash. They are cash machine. And around this topic of cash machine, of course, fintechs have got new ideas. So this is one of the connections between fintechs and the distribution sector, and one of the connections between fintechs and insurance companies. On the other hand, insurance companies need in Vietnam to develop more sophisticated services for firms. Some of them can be easily imported from outside with practice, again, with local flavor. But you need the technology, joint ventures, fintech, again, What about these evolutions? So real estate insurance company, cash management, fintechs. There's a lot of topics around this dimension. Another point I wanted to say a few words on is private banks, private banking. What about private banking? This is, of course, one of the key of the future. Retail bank is not the future. Retail bank will be modernized, restructured, integrated fintech technologies. Perhaps in a few years from now, cash will nearly disappear. So banks should move to other kinds of organization. And among these organizations, of course, they are very interested by specific activities like private banking, which is one of the key points to integrate new knowledge and also to get high margins. So you have a topic on that. Private banking modernization, private banking development, how to organize that in terms of structure. Is there a market for international banks? Is there a market for Vietnamese or joint ventures with international banks? What about insurance companies in that sector? So there's a lot of questions around this. Of course, I would like to have a few phases on the markets. So you have stock markets. Stock markets have been growing, been developing. We still have room for improvement, even classical improvements. About indexes, about future markets, about options, about commercial products also. What about coffee? What about rice? Is there room for a market? What kind of market? How can it be defined? And so on. So this is, I mean, very central for the development of international trade, risk hedging policies of producers in Vietnam, but also for the development of the financial markets as a whole in the country. So there's a few topics there which could be developed, One of the question is, what about the specificities, potential specificity of Vietnamese market, which is of course connected to the production of a country and export of the countries, the import of the countries. What about also the image of this market? Because if you don't have liquid future markets, at least a few large players and indexes, you are not, your technology is not considered as, would say, feasible, acceptable. I think also you have new elements to go through. If you have a look to papers, for example, today, you have impact investing is coming in. What are development and impact investing in Vietnam? What are the lessons from outside? There's a good topic around this idea. Also, I never had a thesis on financial communication. What about financial communication? Is there financial communication in large non-financial companies and large banks? How is it characterized? What are the strengths and the weaknesses? What are the tools and technologies used? Is it comparable to what's happened in other countries? What would be the good practice to introduce? Do you believe that a good financial policy increase the value of the companies or the value of the banks? This is also behind this topic. So we have several topics around communication, financial communication, I would say, in Vietnamese firms, banks, what to learn, what to improve, what is regulation, how to modify the regulation to improve the system. You find also these topics. I think also that I said a few words on green, but you can argue more on energy, on pollution, on carbon. We have a lot of large topics on that. Even central banks in their policy today want to take into account the climate and pollution dimension. What does it mean for the banks? If the central banks say have to manage, of course, the price level, means inflation, perhaps growth. That's the main difference between the Europeans and the Americans. But also, as I say right now, I have to be one of the largest players on the climate consequences, climate change consequences, and pollution through the tools I know how to run. What does it mean in Vietnam? What does it mean for the largest bank in the country? What does it mean for the company in terms of investment? What does it mean for non-financial companies in terms of investment portfolio? What does it mean for investors, funds, brokers in their investment policies? So this is a good possibility, large possibilities of finding topics. All these topics are up to date. They are topics for the future. So she should be covered by a few phases. Okay. Perhaps last. Could have also topics of foreign investment in Vietnam. So we have different categories of investment in different economic sectors coming from different countries, different firms. Of course, classical comparisons has been made, but there's probably some more specific topics to go through on foreign investments, specific industries, return in the country in terms of development, increase of salaries, tax sources, for the state or the cities, for example. So leverage created by foreign investment. That would have a topic about leverage brought by foreign investment, which could be a very good topic also. So I wanted to give you some more ideas. So remember, you have my topics here, you have my explanations, I added some. You will have a list of all the topics which have been presented by the students by 3 different intakes, which should be 14, 15, 16. It's not completely available for 17. They are writing at the moment. But that means you have about close to 100 topics which are listed, and this list is probably on Canvas. If it's not on Canvas, ask to Trampoline to send you directly by email the list. We sent you also a few good phases from Okemin City and from Hanoi. We have good phases both sides, in the north and the south. Just in order to get examples of what we are waiting for. Receivable policy, it's open door, open window policy. Now we have about 20 minutes left. I would like to move to another element, and the other element, and you should have this, it's about defense. We have been through a question developed by Professor Chan on how to write, how to select a topic, how to write, technical difficulties you have to meet. Okay, we just have a very quick look on defense. I want to go more into defense structure, constraint, and preparation. So I will move from these slides to another set, which is very short in my presentation, which is 88. We have 3 slides. I hope I will find them easily. 88, where is it? Should be there. It seems to be okay. So I hope you see my slide. It's called Oral Presentation 1, Structure. If you don't see that, just tell me.
No, we don't see, sir.
You don't see?
No, we don't see your slide.
Where are my slides? On my screen. Partager. Why you don't see my slide? Bah oui. Je comprends pas pourquoi je n'arrive pas à les remettre. C'est ça, hein, je l'ai moi, mais eux ne les voient pas.
Eux ne les voient pas. Bon. Alors on va refaire comme ça. On va le remettre en... Où est-ce qu'ils sont?
Mais ils étaient en bas là.
Que je vais remettre en écran partagé.
J'ai mis partager, c'est ce que j'ai fait.
Non,
Hein.
c'est pas ça. C'est celui-là.
88. Ouais, c'est celui-là.
Et normalement, ça devrait être bon.
Is it okay now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, fine. Oral presentation structure. That's okay? Okay, so thank you. Merci. So, it's just to underline. It is same idea with the written part and the oral part. Written part, I said, you have an assignment. I tried to explain what I want first, but I made a presentation also of the different steps. I went back to the topics. And now my last message today is to say, okay, what I explained is 50% of the final grade. But the other 50% is the oral presentation. So don't say, let's start by step number 1, and we will think to a final presentation in 5-6 months. Keep in mind that 50% of your grades is in the written part, but another 50% is in the oral presentation. And that probably you will have a better presentation at the end if you understand now what we are waiting from you in the oral presentation. I will also say that some of your past colleagues decided to prepare slides at the time they were writing the thesis itself. For example, when you write your research question, you can prepare a slide on research question. When you write your methodologies, you can do the same. Okay. One of the strength of this organization is that when you are designing a slide, you are obliged to say what is important, what is really the message, what is important in my chapter or in my paragraph. So you reduce more, you are more structured, you are more clear also for your reader. So this is why I want to come back in a few minutes on that, on these elements. What is the structure of your presentation? I mean, what are we waiting for you at the end? We are waiting for an oral presentation. It means you will have a screen, you have a jury, and we'll say, okay, fine, floor is yours. You have got 20 minutes, no more than 25. You are supposed to make a presentation with a PowerPoint presentation, and will not interrupt you for 20 to 25 minutes. So it is clear that this presentation is very essential. And this presentation has to be built, designed in such a way you convince the member of the jury. Conviction is very important. Okay, that means that you'll have opportunities to come back on that. But the slides are important. The quality of the slides, and the quality of the slides, takes into account the fact that the member of the jury have read your thesis. So it's not a summary of the thesis, it's something on the thesis, of course, but a bit different. Okay. You have to take into account the fact that generally, jury members have already attended 3 or 4 presentations before yours. And that you have to convince that your presentation is better than the one of your colleagues. It's a kind of competition somehow. Yeah. So of course, what you write on the slides is important, but the way you will present it is also important. I will come back on that. Number of slides. Yeah. The timing. When we say 20 to 25, it means it's not 10, it's not 35. So you have to be in line with the rules. You have to be in line with the argument to convince. you have to be in line with the fact that the jury members have read your thesis and they are not waiting for a summary. So this is the first part. And you have to prepare that a long time before. Of course, at the end, a few days before, you will come back in your slides and reorganize, improve them, repeat, and so on. That's what I would say in the next slides. But no, it's the result, it's a product coming from a long preparation, a long-term preparation. After that, the second part is 20-25 minutes of question and answer, discussion with the jury members. And of course, the jury members will be mainly interested if they think that your methodology is correct, references also, research question, okay, they have understood what you have done in your analytical part, they will focus on specific points. Specific points are very different from one topic to the other. But they want something which is of interest for them. Though you have also to be prepared and perhaps to introduce a few points which could be questions in the second part in the discussion for the jury members. That means when you have a presentation followed by questions and answers, if you are managing properly the process, you have to prepare the jury member to ask the question you want. The third step, and it is the last step, there will be an evaluation and feedback process. And you know, the defense as a whole is a 1 hour defense. So that means it's 20-25 minutes first part, the PowerPoint, 20-25 minutes, the discussion, and another about 10 minutes for the evaluation. So it means to remember, have a short meeting together and we decide what would be your grade for the written part, what would be your grade for the oral part, calculate the arithmetic average, and they write a few sentences and on your research and presentation. And last, second part, you have a feedback. You come back and you know your grades, and you have comments and perhaps suggestions also if you want to go further on your paper. In terms of number of slides, this is very often the question raised by students. Students ask how many pages for a written part, how many slides for the oral part. Yeah. So I always say there is no answer, but in fact, it's easier to answer to this question than for a written part. In general, we think it's in general, it's not standard norms. 1.5 minutes per slide, which means 20-25 minutes, about 15-17 slides. Of course, in this calculation, don't take into account the slides of the presentation, a slide with a title in your name, for example, or part 1, part 2, but slides with content. Okay, so just to give you an idea and think about that first. So very often I've got a question also on how to organize a presentation. 3 parts, the last slide. Okay. Part 1, it's very simple, very classical presentation. If you remember what I said on your assignment and you compare to part 1, you understand that the 3 first slides are in fact short presentation summaries, if you want, on the 3 first paragraph of your introduction. First one on topic, its interests, motivations, limits, perimeters. This is exactly what I said at the beginning of the session. Second one on research question. Third one on methodology. And something new for fourth one, which is completely different from what you wrote in the written part. In the thesis, it says it will be the presentation of the chapters. Here we don't need that. It will be 4 or 5 references. Not the best one, not 50. A very limited number. The references which were very useful to you in your preparation of the thesis. This is part 1. Part 2, and I'm back also to the what I said in the assignment. Part 2 is a presentation of a result. That is to say, the answers to your research question, what we are waiting for. What are your answers to question 1, to question 2, to question 3, or to sub-question 1 or 2 or 3? What are they? This is very central. It's 4 or 5 slides, it depends on the topic. For part 3, I am back to what I said in the first slide. You are also in a situation you try to show to the jury members that you have a good knowledge of the topic, and you are able to connect the topic with our dimension, our fields, our firms, and so on. And that you have studied specifically a few points which are, of course, of interest, but which are not results. It means answers to the research questions. And if you introduce them in this first part, we call that focus or specific points, you have, perhaps you will have a question on that. And of course, as you know very well this topic, you will be in a situation to deliver a very good answer, to be convincing in the second part, when the question will be raised. So this part 3 is very important. And this is very often in the part 3 presentation, but we understand if a student shall be, such wrote a classical and acceptable thesis with good research question, good methodologies, good presentation of the results, has a real very good understanding of a topic. And the last slide, there's always a last slide, there is no conclusion, in fact. Last slide is what are the limits of the studies? It means not the limits of the topic, it's the limits of the study. Yeah. Limits of the topic, it's part 1, first slide. Here it's the limits of a study. It means what you wanted to do, what you have done, what is not exactly the same, what perhaps also you have done, you have been through analysis which were not forecasted at the beginning. That's life. You explain. And what are, same slide, the long and short-term perspective. Short-term is very easy. It says at the time of the defense, we say, okay, you've done a good job, but what will you do if we give you another 3 or 4 months? What will be your action plan to improve your paper? You are still in the same situation, you are part-time students who are working at the same time and so on. What can you do to improve? Long-term perspective is completely different. It means you are working on blockchain, or you are working on IFRS, or you are working on M&A regulation, and you will be involved in the months to come in the research teams, in a legal firm, in accounting, Big Four, or in a bank, working in a research team on blockchains and extensions. And you will be able to study the same topic. But now you have time to do that. You have budgets. You have other economists, bankers, accountants, lawyers around you. If you need budgets, to collect data or to make an interview outside Vietnam, you get the budget. What will you do? What will be? What will be the main point, the main priorities? That's what it means. So this is what I'm waiting for you. Prepare that. And what you find here, it's more suggestion than anything else, beginning the slides, the design of the slides. I say a few weeks here, I would say a few months now. Start now. Don't hesitate to send me partial version. Your final version should be available a few days at least before the very final version. Spend time on the design of the slide. It's part of your conviction capacity. Remind that the speech quality is also an asset. And it's useful for this presentation, but it's useful also for your professional life. I mean, to be able to make a speech, to be convincing, to use the words, the different possibilities to accelerate, to reduce the speed of the speech. This is very important. This is part of your conviction. Don't forget also that you will be in a classroom. Don't sit behind the computer. Walk. Don't leave room, but you can move from 5 meters. We have 5 meters on one side, 5 meters on the other one, and this is good for you in terms of management of stress, and this is good also in terms of capacity to attract the interest of the jury members. Invest on the focus on just what I said, and because you invest on the focus, you prepare also point 7, the discussion with jury members. Okay, so this is what I wanted to underline with these 3 slides. You have more detailed slides prepared by Professor Chan on the defense. You have 11 slides. You receive the slides already. Read these slides also. Okay. See another presentation, and both presentations are very useful for you, I think. Remember that we had slides we used in the first session, how to write, for example, which is technically very useful. We went through that. For today, what I wanted to do is to be clear on the assignment, what you have to do right now in the first period of time. Second, to discuss again on topics and to try to show you that a large number of topics are difficult to deal with, either because information is not available or because they are up to date. It seems to be nice, but it's very, you are not writing for a newspaper, but you are in research here. Or because everything is written, there is no room available for you, or because we have research institute working daily on that. And on the contrary, you can find good topics, in several directions of several categories of players, which are topics for the future. And of course, it's compulsory to write the thesis, to present the thesis, to get good grades at the end. But you have to think also that it is a great opportunity to develop an expertise in one of the question of the fields, which will be an asset for you in the years to come. And this is one of the goals, of course, of the MEBF program. I also think that you have to think very early to your own presentation at the time you start with your topic. After that, you start writing and designing, writing your slides as you want and when you want. But there is a format of the presentation, classroom, 2 jury members, sometimes 3, 1 hour, 3 parts. You have to convince. At the end of the hour, of 50 minutes, the jury members have to be convinced that you have good knowledge, a good academic and professional knowledge of your topic. This is the issue there. And this, our presentation is 50% of your final grade. Okay, this is what I wanted to do with you today. We'll have another session in December, end of December, just before Christmas. And I'm waiting very soon for your papers. You have to start right now. Don't wait too much. It's not to produce the final version. It's not a short-term priority, it's a long-term priority. But if you want to reach the long-term priority, you have a short-term priority, which is to write the first assignment. Thank you very much. Good night, sleep well, and I see you tomorrow, not for methodology, but again, for company evaluation. It will be the last session of company evaluation, 5.2, which is a session mainly centered around electrical signal, plus the conclusions, the good practice lessons, question raised by these 2 cases, biotechnology and electrical signal. Thank you very much, and sleep well and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you, Professor. Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye. Good night.
Thank you, Prof.
Sleep well. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Professor.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Professor.
Goodbye.